Father Abraham had many sons. Many sons had Father Abraham, and I am one of them, and so were you. So let's just praise the Lord. Right hand, right arm. Father Abraham had many sons. Many sons had Father Abraham. Don't you love the delay on this? It doesn't go with the beat. I am one of them, and so are you. So let's just praise the Lord. How about let's just study Torah? Let's study Torah. Hallelujah. Welcome to Hebrew Perspectives, where you will get the Hebrew perspective. I am so glad that you are here with me. I'm glad to be with you. We are studying about Abraham and the many things that Abraham went through. I didn't go back into my notes from last year as to what we talked about at this time, but there's just so much information. There's so much insight into Abraham that, of course, you cannot cover it all. Today, I'm going to try to get through a lot of it and share a bunch of insights. And of course, we will be in Genesis chapter 12. And we will start with the blessing for Hebrew and or for Torah study. Forgive me if I'm distracted a little bit here. I'm just making sure everything's in order. Again, what we do here is we do this on a regular basis. We do this every week. We do Torah study just like the Messiah and his disciples did. Just like Moses and King David and so on. It's all throughout the history, and it's still done today. And we do it right here. We study Torah on a weekly basis. And we'll give you some Torah basics. Torah means instruction. It's the first 5 books of the Bible. Remember to like and share these videos. And if you're on YouTube, subscribe. Thank you for those who have recently subscribed on YouTube. That is wonderful. Thank you for being with us today. So let's get to it. Let's bless the Lord. Let's get into some insights. Those of you from other parts of the world, thank you for joining us. Let me know where you are in the comments, where you are joining us from. That is great. We have people from the Philippines, we have people from Africa, from South America. It's wonderful. And of course, right here in our wonderful country of America. And people from Canada too. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us. Oh, wow. We're set apart to do this, aren't we? With his commandments, and has commanded us to engross ourselves in the words of Torah. Please, Lord our God, sweeten the words of Torah in our mouth and in the mouth of your people. That's why we're talking about this. Hallelujah. The family of Israel. May we and our offspring and the offspring of your people, the house of Israel, all of us, know your name and study your Torah for its own sake. Blessed are you, Lord, who teaches Torah to his people Israel. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who selected us from all peoples and gave us his Torah. Blessed are you, Lord, giver of the Torah. And as the blessing says, may this Torah study, may it always be sweet to you. Lately, the scripture has come to me where Isaiah talks about woe to them that call good bad and bad good, and call light darkness and darkness light, and call the sweet bitter and the bitter sweet. Each one of those examples, good is Torah, light is Torah, sweet is Torah. You hear these words often when we're studying and we're talking about these things. And so things, words, devar. I know I say things a lot, but you have to understand, we talk about good, the Messiah, he's the light of the world. The Torah is sweet. And so today we have a world today that is reversing these things, and the things of God are being called bad. There's an agenda out there in the world today that's they disguise things as being good, but they're calling the good bad. It's the treachery and the deceitfulness that is happening. But anyway, today we have Lech Lecha. We're going to be talking about transacting in faith. Before we get to a lot of the transacting in faith, we are going to talk a lot here about Lech Lecha. And Lech Lecha means go forth, or even better, go for yourself. And the Lord said to Abram in Genesis chapter 12 and verse number 1, go for yourself and from your relatives and from your father's house to the land that I will show you. Now, if the thoughts, or if you remember in the Gospels where the Messiah says, leave your father and your mother and follow me, this is you have to wonder about the audience that he was speaking to. They probably were well versed in what their father Abraham did and the stories revolving around Father Abraham, and because Father Abraham did have many sons. And also maybe you even think about maybe what the Apostle Paul says, about working out your own salvation with fear and trembling. Or maybe you think of King David in Psalms 45 and 11 saying, hearken, O daughter, and see, and incline your ear, forget your own people and your father's house. Interesting. So what I'm trying to show you here is that a path to Torah, a path to studying the Bible, finding truth, may isolate you. It may cause you to be a little bit lonely in what you are doing. And so when you do find a place that you can learn these things, and you find out you're in a minority, so to speak. That's what Abraham was. Shabbat Shalom for those of you that are joining us. I see people are trickling in. That's wonderful. Now, so Lech Lecha is a call. Go for yourself. It's a call to be separate from your homeland, to be separate from your birthplace and your father's house. Now, I don't know what it's like for you, but when I go back to my hometown, my hometown isn't. It's different. Maybe when you go back to your hometown, you're. I'm not saying that I'm not welcome. It's just one of those things. It's just like there's not anything there for me anymore. I'm in a place where I'm going in a different direction, so to speak, than where my homeland, my birthplace is. I was born in a very beautiful place that many people love to go to and want to retire at, as a matter of fact. And that place is Duluth, Minnesota. But, it's not about a physical place. I mean, that's where they want to go to. I'm in search of in a balance again of physicality and spirituality. We want to make this world a better place and a place where God can dwell. But we also want, the world to come, so to speak. We want that spirituality in our lives. But in the process, when we're doing this, when we are stepping out, we are actually putting ourselves into a place where we're sometimes we feel like we're on our own. And that's what Abraham had to have felt like when he did this, because he broke from the crowd. Okay, when you break from the crowd, people notice and things happen, and you also have to understand that Abraham also, he was a pioneer. He didn't have anyone to look back to. we study Torah and we look and we can say, wow, Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and King David and Elijah and all of these, and then on into the Messiah and the apostles. We have things that we can look at, examples that we can look at, and we can understand they help us. But Abraham, he didn't have somebody that he could look back to. Now, he lived in a world that was very different, and it's very much like the world that we live in today. And so basically the Lord tells him, I will make a great nation of you, verse 2, and I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who curses you I will curse, and all the families of others shall be blessed themselves by you. And so go from yourself from a land, so to your father's house, and I will show you to the land that I will show you. So what's happening here is that, he's going out. It's a test of love for God, and he's ready to accept this test and this sacrifice of being in isolation. Now, one may ask, how was going to Canaan different than being in Ur Hasdim? And well, you have to kind of look at it like this. You have to kind of maybe think of the words of the Messiah when nobody is accepting what you're trying to preach or teach. You dust off your feet and you go somewhere else. And that's exactly kind of what happens here. You have where the world that Abraham lived in, and we don't have much background on Abraham, but we can also realize that Canaan was ripe for God's message. It was ripe. So according to the Avodah Zarah 45a, in Canaan, Abraham proclaimed the name of God, built altars, and converted idolaters without being molested or cursed, as had been the case in the country of his birth. So where he was running into problems. And like I said, we don't have a whole lot of background. That's why we look into the Midrash and why we look into these stories. But according to Chassam Sofer, he did not go about smashing idols and scorning his own safety, but seeing that people were listening to him, he preached and acknowledged truth and sought only to gain converts. So you see here, here's a lesson that we have to learn. And when I first became a believer, and you are quite aggressive. You're excited about coming to the knowledge of a one true God, being brought under the wings of the Shekinah, and you understand these things, and you're excited about it, and you maybe even scare some people. You maybe even go around smashing their idols. You do some things that may even cause people to get angry with you, and that's okay. But there's a time for that, and then there's a time for let's do what works in helping people to be brought under the wings of the Shekinah, to bring them to a knowledge of one true God. And so he's going to the land of which I will show you. All right. And so you see that this is a test in itself, because he's saying, I'm the land I'm going to show you. You don't know where I'm taking you. And so he's asking him to step out and go somewhere where he's like, you step out. You don't know where you're going yet. And it's kind of like in later on in Genesis chapter 22, which is the most revered chapter in all of Torah, because it has to do with the binding of Isaac, the Akedah, which we will dive in deep on that when we get to that point. But at that point in Genesis 22:2, he tells them to, go to a mountain of which I will tell you. He just tells them to set out. He doesn't tell them right away where he's going. So now in verse number 2, it says here, and I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. Now, so basically, God is, if you read that and look at that, God's saying, I'm going to give you children. I'm going to give you prosperity. And he says, and make your name great. I'm going to give you fame. Well, think about that. I mean, isn't that what a lot of people, everybody wants recognition. We don't do these videos here so that someday people will say, wow, do you watch the rabbi with the goofy hat? No, it's not fame. It's not, we're spreading Torah. And this is why God chose Abraham and did give him children and prosperity and fame, because he was willing to step out and do what God wanted him to do. And you shall be a blessing. That's why we're here. We want to be a blessing to those around us. We want to share Torah because Torah is a blessing. Torah is water and life. It's bread. It's sustenance. It's everything that we need. It's what we're trying to do here. And you shall be a blessing. So Rabbi Mecklenburg, he says, Abraham alone recognized God through his own intellectual investigation, whereas Isaac and Jacob already had it as a family tradition. At the end of time, the light of the Spirit will shine forth so brightly that knowledge of the truth will be based on reason itself and not on tradition. Now, as the prophet Isaiah exclaims, the earth shall be full of the knowledge of God, and the water as the waters cover the sea, in Isaiah 11:9. And you know what? When I look at it, when I'm sharing this, and I'm seeing that people are coming to a knowledge, and people are growing and seeing and wondering and wanting to know more. I love coming across a hungry soul that wants to know more, that they want to know the insights, they want to get closer, they want to eat the bread of life. So when Abraham came on the scene, when he came on the scene, people of that day, they understood that there was an original God, and that God is the essence of being. People had an understanding of that. They did. And this is, when we look at this is the four-letter name that we commonly known as the tetragrammaton. Okay, we understand that, but it's also known as the aliyah. And the word havaya can only be written in a singular form. Now, it's the conjunction of the verb to be. All right, so we understand that that this is what it is, and so they understood in that day that there was this essence of being, that there was this one God. But the people of that day, they kind of looked at it as like it was kind of out of their realm of thinking. It was above them. It was kind of inaccessible, and it was really it was irrelevant to their existence and their thought. And so this is why the people of that day connected to the forces of nature. This is where we get the name Elohim. Elohim means mighty forces. All right, we understand. Do you understand? I don't know if you've ever heard that before. But so now Abraham, he comes along and he says, Havaya is Elohim. And they have to be kind of wondering, what's this guy talking about? They see the mighty forces around them. They worship the sun and the moon and the stars and the wind and all of that. And they understand that. But now you have Abraham coming along and he's saying, you know what? Havaya is Elohim. It's all echad. It's all one in a unity, in a compound unity. So the essence of being, the Havaya, and the forces of nature are one. Okay? Now the Baal HaTurim, he points out that the Hebrew letters of the name Elohim have the same numerical value of Hateva, which means natural order. And you've heard me say it before, and I'll say it many times, that what we do here, why we teach what we teach, connecting with God through mitzvot, through commandments, connecting the physical to the spiritual, is part of getting into the natural order of what God created from the very beginning. So when we fall out of those things, when we don't follow what God wants us to do, what happens? We fall out of that natural order and things don't go right. Chaos ensues. And so here you have Abraham coming and he's telling all these people there's a natural order and there's a way to control all this chaos. And it is Havaya. He is the forces of nature and they're all in one. So like I said, there's not much about Abraham's past. And that leads us to look into rabbinic writings, to look to the Talmud, to look to the sages, to look to the Midrash, and to help us to understand why God chose Abraham, why he chose this individual. Like I said, there's not much immediately in the Torah, but there's something interesting that when we look in the Tanakh, and we go to Joshua chapter 24, and we look at verse number 2 of Joshua chapter 24. And let me see here, make sure I'm on the right page. 24 and 2. Joshua said to the entire nation, "Thus said the Lord, the God of Israel, your forefathers, Terah." Remember, Terah is the father of Abraham. And it says here, Terah, the father of Abraham and father of Nahor, always dwelt beyond the Euphrates River, and they served gods of others. But I took your forefather Abraham beyond the river and led him throughout all of the land of Canaan. I multiplied his seed and gave him to Isaac. And then it goes on to Isaac, I gave Jacob and Esau, to Esau, Mount Seir. So you see how it goes on here. But the point is here, we're talking about how there's not a whole lot of detail, but when you read this, I don't know about you, but my mind goes to the very fact that they, in their homes, they talked about these things. They talked about these things. This is the wonderful thing about Jewish heritage is you can go back 3,500 years and people talk about these things. When you get to Passover and you go through the Haggadah, there's a part in there where the children ask, what does this mean? And so through tradition, not traditions of men, the very phrase traditions of men is a tradition of men. But anyway, I won't get off on that. But the point is that we can look back at customs and we can look back at these things and we can see that there's always been a pattern and that it has been kept in the family. There are things in my family that my family, I can mention things and all of my children and even, my parents, not so much disconnected. I'm really, so you can say that I'm kind of a pioneer, so to speak, because the people before me really didn't I don't share the same traditions. I don't share the same things. And so now I've stepped out. Now my late father-in-law, may his memory be a blessing. He was key in helping and leading and guiding me. So he was a different generation, a different level, and helped out. And I love my mother-in-law, my little Jewish mother-in-law. She's still an inspiration to me today. And so, but we stepped out, and in that, my children, when I mention certain things, just key phrases, key understandings, key teachings, they know, they remember. And I want those things to live on for generations to come, barring the coming of the Messiah, of course. May it soon be our time. So now, where was I? I really, really jumped all over the place on that. But because it was talking about Joshua 24:2, and so here we are. We're stepping out in faith, and we're going to learn how to transact in faith. And so there's an interesting thing. So I was talking about, so we go to the Midrash, we go to allegorical stories that help us to understand who Abraham was, where he came from, and what he did. And one of the stories is, and I think I told this last year, but one of the stories is how his father, Terah, owned an idol shop. He transacted in idolatry. He made and he sold idols. So people could go down to the idol tree, and get idols for $1 or a dinar, whatever was the money during that day. I know I'm trying to be funny, but not always. But anyway, the story is that Terah went somewhere, and then Abraham, he went into his father's idol shop. He went down to the idol tree, and he took a stick and he smashed all the idols. And then he took that stick and he left it in the hand of the biggest idol that was in the room. And so here you have this big idol holding the stick, and all these other little idols on the table are all smashed. And his father comes home, and Terah, he demands an explanation. I love this stuff. And he says, and Abraham says, the big idol did it. Which Terah says, are you making fun of me? He says, idols cannot do anything. Of which Abraham turns around and he says, well, why do you worship them then? It's this kind of thinking. It's this kind of stepping out and saying, and when you interact with people, you're like, are you using common sense? Are you using logic here? I mean, you're worshiping something that it can't do anything for you. And so here Abraham, he challenged the idolatry of that day, of his birthplace, of his homeland. He had this revolutionary thinking going on. And that revolutionary thinking was common sense. And, people get caught up in what they're doing. And when I think of what some of the world is doing today and some of the things they're doing, it's like, wow, people have gone mad. It takes courage to challenge the perceived wisdom of this world. Let me say that again. It takes courage to challenge the perceived wisdom of this world, and to think new thoughts. Oh my goodness. What are you thinking, people will say? I'm thinking new thoughts. Because the way people are thinking now, no, I can't go that way. I can't fall into that. It just doesn't work that way. So here, Abraham, Hal Avri, the Hebrew, He's thinking new thoughts. He's breaking away. He was on the other side, and the rest of the world was on the other side. So it didn't take long for him to have an effect, because here, so it says, so if you go back to the previous Torah portion from last week from Noach, it ends with that they left and they went with their father Terah, and they took Lot with them, and they went to a place called Haran, and Haran is a very dry place. So they ended up, they left out, and there was another one of these trials, and they ended up in a very dry place. And so, but the point here is that it says here, and they had an effect in Haran, because it says, and the souls that they made in Haran. What souls are they talking about? We know at the time they're called Abram and Sarai. They didn't have children. She couldn't have children. I find it interesting that the first three matriarchs were all barren, and it was God that had to make it so that they could. And this is another one of these points, that one of these things that people don't seem to understand, that sometimes things come into your life because God wants you to talk to him. God wants you to pray to him and talk to him so that he can reveal his glory, and then he can do that. And so when things are happening in your life and you don't understand, maybe sickness, something like that, God's saying, talk to me. Talk to me. And he wants you to understand that it's him that you go to for this, to help. So the souls that they made in Haran didn't have any children. And again, these are the souls whom they brought under the wings of the Shekinah. They left out of Ur Hasdim, and they went to Haran, and they made souls. They were bringing people in to the knowledge of the one true God. So let's go to chapter 13. Chapter 13. Now, so Abraham went up from Egypt. I'll say Abraham, but for a while there, it's Abram and Sarah. But you always remember, we're always talking about Abraham and Sarah. Of course, we understand this. And then the sages even tell you that, you should always say it that way. But anyway, so now chapter 13, when we look at this, we understand that so Abram went up from Egypt with his wife and all that was his, and Lot with him. So through everything that happens through all this, Lot is there. And not a lot is said about Lot and what's going on. He's not mentioned much, but you have to wonder what his interaction was in the camp, because they were people that brought souls in. This is what they were doing. They were bringing people to the one true knowledge of God. And here you have Lot, who was he was there, but yet he was not there. And you've met people like this, I'm sure. They're there, but yet they're not there. Maybe you've been in one of these congregations where, they're there, and then all of a sudden they leave. And there's like an excuse. And I've had congregations before, and this has happened. If you've ever led a congregation, you see it. You don't know why they leave. You don't, they don't like you. They don't like me. There's people that just don't like. I've had somebody say, I don't like you. And it's like, why? I don't know. I just don't. It's weird. Life is just weird like that. So here you have Lot, and then you have this thing that comes along where all of a sudden you have the flocks and the cattle and the tents and everything's going on. This becomes an excuse for Lot to make his departure. And so in verse number 10 of chapter 13, we see something interesting. So Lot raised his eyes and saw the entire plain of the Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere, before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt going toward Zoar. The point I want to show you here is that part where it says, like the garden of the Lord. He looked to Sodom and Gomorrah and he was reminded. Remember now, all these traditions and everything's being taught to people, and Abraham probably talked about Adam and Eve, Adam and Chava, about the Garden of Eden, and when he's telling these stories, doing a Bible study, bringing people in to the knowledge of one true God. Then you have to think that Lot was there and he heard these stories and he knew what was going on. He was in these tents, but he was there, but he wasn't there. But yet he looked at it and he saw it. Wow, that looks like the Garden of Eden. But things aren't always what they seem, are they? They're not. No, they're not. And then we see all these things happen, and yet, we go through the whole Sodom and Gomorrah thing and on all of that, and then we see here, even after he departs from Abraham, Abraham's the kind of guy that finds out what's going on, and he even though Lot doesn't want to be a part of God's people anymore, he doesn't want to be there. He wants to go and do his own thing, whatever's right in his own eyes. Even to this point, Abraham goes and rescues him, not just because he's family. It's not what it's. See, Abraham shows himself and proves himself over and over and over again to be the right choice as to why God chose him, this individual, to carry out what God wanted him to do, to bring a birth of a nation. So now Abraham rescues Lot, and then we have the story of Melchizedek. Or it's really pronounced, Melchizedek is often you've heard it said. It's actually Melchizedek, king of righteousness. Zedek is the word for righteous. And we find this story, Lot's taken captive, Abraham saves Lot. And then, let's see here, where are we at? Forgive me. So let me look at my notes, make sure I'm going to, I was looking right at it. I'm getting ahead of myself. That's what's going on here? Okay, here, wait. That's what it was. I turned the page when I didn't need to and got myself lost here. All right, so you have Abraham saves Lot, and then you have all these kings coming together, and then you have the king of Sodom. He comes out. I don't know if you knew this or not, but when people think of Sodom and Gomorrah, they think of the debauchery. Okay, they think of homosexuality. Now, the sages will tell you that at the very root of this is that Sodom and Gomorrah did not practice hospitality. That's when we see the story of Sodom and Gomorrah and what they wanted to do to these strangers that came in, that they weren't very hospitable. And this is at the root of things. When we understand this, that's exactly what happens with the root of things. So, but then the Torah says that Melchizedek, the king of Salem, he brought out bread and wine. Now, just before that, the king of Sodom came out, the other kings came out, and they didn't bring anything. The king of Sodom was like, okay, you can have all the booty, just let me have the people. Okay, so there's things going on here, and the king of Sodom just does not have the right attitude. But here comes Melchizedek. He brings out bread and wine, which is a symbol of Torah and mitzvot, Torah and commandments. And so, because at the death of someone, when you die, God's going to look at how often you obeyed his commandments, how often you connected to him, and how often you performed those commandments, and how often you studied Torah, how often you dug into his word to see him and to know him and to understand him, to eat the bread of life. And the Messiah says, I am the bread, right? How often when we go to judgment, God looks at those things and he wants to see how much we've amassed, how much we've done that, how much we've connected with God, how much we study. And remember, I've said it before, the Torah is God. So what we see here is that, I don't know if you know this, maybe I shared this last year or not, but Melchizedek, he's the high priest. He's the priest of the God Most High, but he is also Shem, the son of Noah. Now, Abraham was a king, and Melchizedek was a priesthood of the high God, and he is given, let's see, where are we? This chapter. He's given me the people, take possessions for yourself. So, okay, he brought bread and wine. He was priest of the Most High. He blessed him, saying, blessed is Abram of God the Most High, maker of heaven and earth, and blessed is God the Most High, who has delivered your foes into your hand and gave him a tenth of everything. Now, I want you to understand something very subtle here that you don't see, that people don't see. And this here is where the priesthood is given to Abraham. See, now, Abraham was pretty good at what he did, and he was considered a king. By this time, he's got quite a few souls that they have gathered and brought into their flock under the wings of the Shekinah, and he is a king unto himself. I mean, he's a king. Now, through Melchizedek, he's being given the priesthood. But when we read verse number 19, we see something here where it says, he blessed him, saying, blessed is Abram of God the Most High, maker of heaven and earth. And in the verse 20 says, and blessed is God the Most High, who has delivered your foes into your hand and gave him a tenth of everything. Now, what I want you to understand here is it's been reversed. And that's why prayers today are careful to make sure that we understand that we put God first in our prayers. Okay? Our, Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King. Okay? It has to do, yes, we're talking about ourselves. He's our Father, he's our King, but it's glorifying him and putting him in the proper order. So what happened here with Melchizedek is that he reversed the blessing, so to speak. He blessed Abram first, and then he blessed God. And the sages see that as that was the mistake that was ended up being reversed. And so now, why is this important is that, and I think I mentioned this last week as to why Yochanan the Immerser, John the Baptist, why, the Messiah came to him to be baptized, and he said, no, I should be baptizing you. Believe it or not, a bug just flew in. And bugs aren't kosher. Forgive me. I think it was a fruit fly or something. I just want you to know that I'm human and I'm real too, and things happen, and that was bonus. I hope you enjoyed that. Okay. So we understand that And I think I mentioned this last week that Yochanan, he was a Levite. And we know the Messiah, he is the Son of God. Whenever you see Son of God, it means King of, he's the King of the Jews. Basically, we know that he's King of the Jews. And so he was being baptized, and he's been immersed in a mikvah many times up to this point, but this was done in the Jordan, in a public place. Why was it done at the Jordan? Because that's where kings are anointed and baptized to be king. So here now you have the Levitical priest. Why do we say this? Is because now you have to understand that at the time, the Levitical priesthood in Israel was corrupt. And why do I say this? Is because at that time, Rome was in charge, right? And they basically just gave the priesthood over to whoever was the highest bidder. And so Caiaphas, we know he was appointed by Rome, and that's not how it's done. So you can see how all of this was messed up from the very beginning. So John should have been, and probably he was a priest, he should probably have been the high priest. We don't know that for sure, but in any case, here's what he was doing. They're left to it because of the establishment of what was going on. Here now you have the Messiah needing to be in public, being shown this. Here is your king. Here is your high priest. And so the priesthood is being given to the Messiah. Now, we go back to chapter 15 now, when we see that it says, after these events, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision, saying, "Fear not, Abram, I am a shield for you, your word very great." And the whole goes into the whole process of how am I going to do this? You don't even have kids. What's happening here? But now we see that Abraham, he's on top of the world. He's a king. He's been given the priesthood. He's starting to have what God told him. He's having prosperity and he's having fame. And now okay, Lord, where's the children? All right. He's remembering the promise, but he's having his doubts. He just went and he did some things, he killed some people and he saved some people. And he's like, am I in the right path? He's having, showing that Abraham is human. People tend to deify certain characters in the Bible as if they never did anything wrong. But Abraham is another example of how he shows that we're human. He swallowed a fruit fly during his broadcast teaching people. Okay, I'm not equating myself to Abraham, but just telling you that he's human. All right, people are human. People make mistakes. People doubt. People have doubts. Here, let me go to Rabbi Trugman's book on the Orchard Delights, and I want to show you something here. So there's this whole part here where, and I realize I'm running out of time. As a matter of fact, I think I've gone over, and boy, I may have to skip all this. Leaving things on the table. I might have to do. I don't know. Let's see here. All right. I'm wasting time. All right. Let's just go through. Let's just do this. So, and now there's this part here where in chapter 15, and it says, is it 15? Where? I think I've got my notes written down here wrong. Yeah, I'm not to this part yet. So basically what we have here, what happens is in verse 15, he's having the discussion, and then he covenants with him. We know the story where he takes the animals and he cuts them to pieces, he puts them on either side, and he makes covenant with Abraham. And we understand the sages say it's the Shekinah that passes through the pieces. And verse 17 talks about how, so it happened, the sun set and was very dark. Behold, there was a smoky furnace and a torch of fire. When we look over here at the Hebrew, it's lapid. Torch is lapid, and then it's a smoking furnace. And these really two are kind of one thing. But that comes down to is it's basically the fire. It's the torch. It's the same torch, lapid, that, when we learned about Shavuot, when we learned about Pentecost, at Mount Sinai, and we received the Torah, they saw the torches. The torches came and danced throughout the camp. They came to each and every tongue to accept. Sounds like Acts chapter 2, doesn't it? It sounds like Acts, in the book of Acts, tongues of fire. Okay, so this is the same thing, lapid. It's the same thing like in the story of Gideon, that had torches. All right, so, and then I'm skipping along here. I'm running out of time. Chapter 16, Abram, Ishmael, Abraham, Isaac. You can see how that just wasn't going to work out. I mean, it just had to be, the name had to come in. So in chapter 17, a name change had to happen. And whenever a name change happens, it's kind of like they're a new creature, a new man. So covenant happened. What was that covenant? It was, and then circumcision is talked about. So we see that's where we get the covenant of Abraham and circumcision. And then everybody was circumcised from then there on. That was part of the covenant. And so you had the name change. Let me go to chapter 17. I have verse number 7. I will ratify my covenant between me and you, and between your offspring after you throughout their generations, an everlasting covenant, to be a God to you and to your offspring after you. So to be a God to you, that's the ultimate goal of the covenant. That's the ultimate goal, to be a God to you. So let me go back to chapter 15 and verse number 6, because we're going to finish this out. And he says, chapter 15, verse number 6, and he trusted in the Lord, and he reckoned it to him as righteousness. Okay, so this was the covenant between the parts. This, just before that, and this is what happens, because he was told him, gaze unto the heavens, to go out. There's just too much. So the Torah tells us, regarding 15 and 6, the Torah tells us that God considered Abraham's faith to be meritorious. And so if God spoke to you personally, if you interacted with God on a regular basis, like Abraham did, like Moses did, is that really, what kind of faith is that? That would be an unshakable faith, wouldn't it? I mean, because not for you and I, our faith seems to be a little bit different. So what is going on here? Why is he saying it like this? Because like I said, Moses had direct contact. Now, the Talmud is talking about this. He asks, it asks, did you transact in faith? And I'm trying to hurry because I've gone over time. Did you transact in faith? What this is usually talking about is talking about transacting in business. Did you, when you go to judgment before God, did you do business honestly? Okay, I mean, people like to cheat people. Did you put your finger on the scale? God's a God of weights and balances. To understand that. So that's usually what it has to talk about. But what it alludes to is, did you profit spiritually? Did you profit spiritually? And so, or did you do everything possible to maximize your faith? Now, if you're thinking in your mind, if you're getting a little remez, a little hint teaching here, and you're thinking of the Messiah and the talents, or did you do something with those talents, or did you bury it? Did you do something with that faith, or did you just bury your faith? It takes work. It takes effort. It does. And how do we know that it was more than just faith? That it really, we had to work at it. If you skip ahead to parasha toldot and you go to, which is Genesis chapter 26, we see an answer here to what's being going on here, because the Lord appeared to Isaac, to him, and said, "Do not descend to Egypt, dwell in the land that I shall indicate to you, sojourn in this land, and I will be with you and bless you. For to you and your offspring will I give these lands." Okay, this is more than just about land. Okay, this is the blessing. This is the covenant. This is the continuation. "And establish the oath that I swore to Abraham your father. I will increase your offspring like the stars of the heavens, and will give to you, to your offspring, all these lands, and all the nations of the earth shall bless themselves by your offspring. Because Abraham obeyed my voice and observed my safeguards, my commandments, my decrees, and my Torahs." Why does it say Torahs? There's only one Torah, right? Well, there's what he gave to him orally. Right, what he spoke to him. That's why we have a written Torah, and that's why we have an oral Torah. So there you have it. It takes work. Faith and works. All you works crowd. You got to do something. You got to connect with God. You got to connect the physical and the spiritual. You got to have the balance. It's got to be there, folks. It takes work, and it takes effort. May the Lord bless you and keep you, make his face to shine upon you, and be gracious to you. And the Lord turn his face toward you and give you shalom. Shabbat shalom.